share it between NCs, which are on and like in Europe and outside Europe, which this will be something I will mention further today. Yes, you can change also slide. Okay, this was already debated before on 2018, and it was successfully data protection group was approved and it was established because everyone agreed that there can be like lots of problems that can appear like from keeping data in a not very safe way. However, after this working group was established, it was only like during a year. The work of it, I believe, did not finish, like there was much more to do. And also the information, like the documents that were created and the resources they made are not accessible for everyone. They are not in the members platform. As an NC, we had to find them in the mailing list, which I believe is not the most efficient way to find important information regarding this. If you may pass a slide. Yes, another one. Okay, so that's a little bit on the history. I'm not going to like speak a lot because I think it's a very difficult kind of thing to understand if you are not very updated on the GDPR. You don't understand a lot of it, so I will just explain it like over the top. So yes, my point today, the purpose of like me being here today, like what I want for this to happen is like basically us debating on all of this, agreeing on some like, common practices, let's say, and also being able to share resources between each other and hopefully create a working group at some point who can help all NCs with all of this. Can you pass slide? Thank you. So first, before I even explain what I want to do, I'm going to explain like really quickly things we do that are wrong, so you understand why it's necessary to implement this. First of all, things that are like horrible for data protection are the fact of sharing very important files with an open link, because this means if this link ends up in other people's hand, well, basically this information can be sold, it can be used in a bad way. This includes like, for example, passports we upload in sessions, or like our IDs, information of where we live. All of this can be shared by link. And adding to this is the fact that we just upload information in common files. Like this happens in all kinds of events, like NC's events, including our like EYP Spain's. Everyone is doing this wrong. Internationally, it's also been doing like it's being not used correctly. In the same file, people from different NCs or different kind of roles can upload information there, and then I can see everything and everyone can see my important information without me having accepted that. Can you change slide, please? Something is this. This is like the worst thing that can happen is when you create a form for, like, I'm sure everyone has done this if you have been an organizer. You create a form to have information, and this form is not created on an EYP account. It's created on your personal account, and you end up having lots of photos of for jury reports on your personal drive. In shared, you also end up having lots of signs, lots of authorization codes on your own drive, and then it's nearly impossible to delete, so that information ends up being there forever when it shouldn't. Next, please. Okay, then I'm not going to get a lot into this because I hope they work, like if there's a working group established, this will be something to be mentioned, but using my drive is basically horrible for data protection. What we should all use is shared drives, which allows proper management from an EYP account rather than our personal accounts, and then everything can be deleted, well deleted, let's say. Another one, please. Then again, no, I copied that slide. Thank you. Then again, this using Google Groups should be something, a common practice that we don't all do, which makes it difficult to delete stuff. Yes, this is basically like me just explaining the mistakes we do that we don't realize. Could you change slide, please? Okay. So what I pretend, like something I pretend here, like to speak, is the fact that in the EYP we are not all countries like from Europe, and the Gdpr speaks like says that if we are sharing information to a non-European country, it should be a non-European country that European authorities have decided are a third country or an organization which ensures that the data will be indeed well protected, or an agreement should be made. This is something we don't do, and we still share information between NCs that are not from Europe to Europe without any kind of agreement between each other, which is essentially not something we should be doing. Could you change the slide, please? Okay, so what I want is someone that ends up being in charge of data protection in every NC, like the same thing that happens with safe persons. I would like this to be something like natural for all of us to have someone who has read a little bit more about data protection, who receives workshops on data protection and is able to give more advice on it. Then the sharing of knowledge. In EYP Spain, we have been doing lots of stuff to be able to implement automation in our processes, and I believe if everyone gets to share this information, like at the end of the day today, I will share a link so you all understand what I mean by Slack, so you can all use it in your NCs. If we all did that, information would be much easily handled, and we could center more instead of losing our time trying to use the information to be able to manage it in a correct way. Yes, could you change the slide, please? So yes, basically, what the most important thing I want today is to encourage the figure of a working group on data protection. I think this is something that should be done. Then also at some point creating a data protection policy, which will be our agreement between European countries and non-European countries. And then at least creating a special data protection section on the members platform, which I think is the least we could do to ensure NCs know that data protection is as important as safety, as other legal stuff. Well, it's legal stuff, all of this, to be honest, that it's something we have not been doing. So yes, that. And finally, having been in the President's Summit recently, which I believe was a very enriching experience, I believe President Summits, summits themselves should be encouraged for different positions, like other board members. And here I would like to speak especially about webinars or summits for people in charge of data protection in their NC to be able to attend and learn more, because it's a very complicated subject, and maybe these webinars could be organized by the working group with support of GB, the office, and making sure that also from outside the organization, people know that we know our stuff, that we are making sure data is managed correctly. So yes, basically it's that, just speaking a little bit about it and making sure we decide something this time that is more long plan than last BNC, because if not, we will end up the same player we ended up in 2018. So yes, that's basically all. Thank you.
Thank you, EYP Spain. Yes, and there are two statements from EYP Sweden and EYP the Netherlands. EYP Netherlands will go first, followed by Sweden.
Thank you. This statement will be rather short, since I think that Anna did a good job of going through it. Essentially, what I would say are two key points. One, that it's not solely a legal obligation. Of course, there are real-life implications of not handling your data properly. I can't be the only one that has somehow gotten access to their own selection panel sheet after they've been selected, or you're getting access to dietary needs or medical requirements that you probably, as a chairperson or someone else, didn't really need to know about, that could have had a real-life impact on someone else. And I've also experienced someone giving a module on writing applications, and in that module, using applications that could be related to real life persons. So of course, all of these things, they have a real life impact, and it is important that we manage our data, since it can lead to awkward and even infringe upon welfare if we don't do it properly. That being said, it's not just a worrying story. It's not only bad. It's not like, oh, this is a bad trend. It's also something positive that we can use as a NC. If we manage it properly, we'll save a lot of time in trying to find the right context, in having people fill out 3 different forms over and over again, because we keep on forgetting what their medical requirements are, and we keep on forgetting what the email address is. If we store our data properly, then we can make sure that the right people have access to the right kind of information, which also means that it's a lot easier to pass on information when you're transitioning to a new board, for instance. So I just wanted to point those things out. Thank you.
Thank you, Netherlands. Sweden, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we would like to begin by expressing our appreciation to EYP Spain for highlighting the importance of data protection, not just for individual members, but for the whole network. And additionally, we, of course, wholeheartedly stand by EYP Netherlands' statements. The GDPR has had a great impact on awareness of data protection, not least due to the flood of emails about it in 2018 and onwards. But although many are aware of its existence, few know exactly what is expected of us. The main talking point is usually the alarmism about the harsh sanctions one will face if you violate it. And there is some truth to it. We might not be subject to the harshest sanctions, but the risk of facing sanctions is nevertheless real. And we are currently seeing a trend of deeper privacy concern, which by extension will lead to greater oversight of compliance. So what examples of challenges are we facing? Well, firstly, children merit specific protection with regard to personal data, according to GDPR, as they are less aware of the risks, consequences, and the safeguards concerned, and the rights, which stresses the importance of explaining how you actually process your data in a clear and understandable way. Secondly, sensitive information stored in jury booklets, selection reports, with flaws and weaknesses are scrutinized. How do we make sure that the juries actually remove such data? Thirdly, the safe person concept, for which individuals are vulnerable and share compromising or otherwise sensitive information. Do we as a network or as individual NCs properly convey how this information remains confidential and how exactly is processed and for how long? And the last point is international data transfers to third countries, which Anna pointed out, which is really important. It adds an additional layer of complexity, since such cross-border data to transfers to non-EU and EEA countries requires exceptions. And since a significant number of NCs are not within EU and EE countries, it's an avenue we need to explore. So hopefully we will establish a working group on this. Because we're a decentralized network, knowledge sharing is key in order to give more NCs the means to reach closer to full compliance. And therefore, we are determined to the very least, consolidate a number of templates for NCs to use. And my question is, what should the working group prioritize within the scope of data protection? Yeah, having said that, looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Sweden. We will now give the word back to EYP Spain to answer to the two statements that were made.
Well, I just agree with both of them. There's nothing else to say. They're just adding to all of this, and well, with their points, it even makes it clearer how important it is to come up with a good solution to it. Well, a good idea, starting to get to know this. So thank you both for your comments.
Yes, thank you. The board would also like to say that the EYP Spain's presentation was very great with all the already knowledge sharing to NCs who might not have used those practices that were shared on the slides. But keeping those slides in mind, we will now open the round of debate. We will take the first question from Croatia, as they had their hand up for such a long time.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I would very much agree with this as a topic of debate. It is very important, and it is a legal obligation for all of the almost all of the NCs. Also, even those who are not within the European Union, because they deal with data of EU citizens. Just point of note regarding shared drives. Basically, they have some sort of problems regarding fine-tuning permissions. A lot of the, I would say, common mistakes which were pointed out by EYP Spain regularly get even more common when you use shared drives, because there is no possibility to limit access to certain parts of those shared drives to just individual people. When you have a shared drive, everyone who is added to it has access to every single part of it. So that's something that you should all keep in mind when you use them. Thank you.
Thank you, Croatia. We'll take point from Belgium, and then we will go back to the proposing entity.
Yeah, I wanted to build on the point of Croatia. As he said that it's that you can only give access to the whole drive and not individual parts of the document. So I don't think that there is any perfect way to share that data in this two people in the same event, as then again data gets decentralized. But what I do think is a priority in the network is the deletion of data. In EYP Belgium itself, sometimes I find files and contact information from 2 or 3 years ago, which is a bit of illegal of what we are allowed to do. So I think it's definitely that. And again, also the permission of people, asking permission of people to store their data in your application forms as well, which EYP Belgium does now, but a few NCs I think haven't done so yet. So I think mainly data storage and data deletion is one of the more prioritized subjects in this matter.
Thank you. Belgium, Spain, you're free to answer.
Well, regarding the first point that was made about the shared drive, that might have been true 6 months ago, but recently with a Google update, shared drives you can share specific folders inside the shared drive, so you don't have to share to all of the drive itself. So that's not true what has been said, and we can say this because we have tested for our 7 regional sessions that recently happened 1 month ago. They were all on the same drive, 7 sessions with lots of officials from each one were shared to their specific one, as well as the organizing team, and there was not an issue using this, so I don't believe that's an issue. Then the second point that was raised, saying that they would focus on the fact of deleting that information and maybe it's more difficult to manage it. I don't think it's that difficult. And again, like in Spain, say it's mejor prevenir que curar. It's better to try, before trying to solve the issue, trying to maybe make it easier to solve. And a way of making it easier to solve is thinking of alternatives and storing the data in a better way, rather than just saying we'll store it however and then make sure to delete it, because it's eventually going to be more difficult to delete that information if it's not done well since the start. And there are ways of doing it, because we have been testing them in EYP Spain, and I know other NCs have been doing it too. And again, this all depends on knowledge sharing, because if we had this debate at the start, maybe 6 months ago, and spoken about, hey, we can use shared drives, maybe today, where people would have been using them instead of believing that you can't share specific files within the shared drive. that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. We were going to take Finland, but apparently Finland doesn't have a point anymore. So first point will come from Serbia, followed by Switzerland, and then we'll take Germany.
Thank you so much for the recognition and also for this proposal, given that it is legally required to protect data as well as just the general importance of it. I think this is a crucial thing that we need to work on in EYP. But as it was mentioned, there are certain discrepancies between EU and non-EU countries. And namely, what was mentioned in the slides, was that there should be disagreement between EU and a particular third country. And in that case, data protection and managing data can go on. I wanted to ask what would happen in the case that a particular member country, a particular NC that it's not an EU member, does not have this certain agreement. In that case, would you be even allowed to use Google Forms, all of these things? I'm just a bit confused coming from a non-EU country myself, as I realize the importance of data protection, but it is a bit difficult doing it between member and non-member countries. Thank you.
I see we have direct response from Albania. Albania, you have the floor.
Yes. Actually, as EYP Spain really mentioned, the data policy, the data protection policy of the prospective data protection policy of the EYP would act as the agreement between EU and non-EU countries, as the GDPR states. But we are forced to comply with GDPR anyway as non-EU countries, since we are handling EU citizen data. But yeah, the prospective policy would act as that agreement between the non-EU and the EU countries about data handling.
We have direct response from Sweden. Sweden, is this related to the very last point made?
Yes.
Great, you have the floor.
Yes, so about international data transfers, what the difference is, it's mainly important for EU countries, since all the data protection supervisor who oversees EU countries and their data protection. If we aren't compliant as EU-based NCs, then that could risk sanctions for us. So it is in our interest, and whether or not the policy itself would act as an exception itself, that is something we need to examine further. One example is like a so-called adequacy decision from the Commission, but unfortunately, only Switzerland and soon the UK, among all of our NCs, are applicable for that types of decisions. Other types of exceptions we need to examine further. So it's not straightforward here. But all in all, it is important. Right now, we aren't compliant. So all the transfers between NCs to non-European countries, non-EU countries, are in compliant. So that's a big deal, and we need to explore that avenue further.
Thank you, Sweden. We will now go to Switzerland as promised.
Thank you, and thank you, EYP Spain and everyone else who's raised this debate. I think it's really important. I just had a question for the GB, and Sevika has raised her hand, so maybe she'll have something to say on this, and maybe the International Office, to know how you are handling data, if you have a data protection policy that can serve as a template for what we're doing, or if you're facing the same problems that NCs are.
Thank you. Direct response from the International Office. Anya, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second day. Thank you for the question, Miriam. And so from our side, we are, of course, also part of the German Foundation, who has a very strict regulations. So all the employees receive also training once a year on how to deal with the data protection. So that's regular practice that the foundation organizes for all of us. That's one measure. So, and the second measure is that for the participants we directly manage, we also promise to delete their data after, I wouldn't now lie, I don't remember how many months, but once this month pass, we delete all the data, and they kind of are informed in the registration form about it. And then, of course, in terms of our consent forms, and also I think Arad mentioned it also for underage and overage, we also do have different consent forms, how we inform the participants, but I also see the point that they might need to be revised because actually they were put together even before the GDPR policies were in place. But these are 3 measures that we are regularly looking into. But I'm also very much looking forward to the working group's outputs, and I think it's a very good idea. And in terms of the reference in the proposal to the member platform and to create exchange materials, that's also not a problem, and it's a good reminder to us. So thank you for that. We could just put together all the data we have and to facilitate this knowledge exchange to make it easier for you.
Thank you, Anya. With apologies to Germany, we will actually now go back to the proposing entity as this round of debate was very active.
Thank you. First of all, regarding what was said from Syria, I think maybe it's a little bit like, maybe I should explain this a little bit more because I'm sure more people have this doubt because I also had it. In the EU, you have to follow the GDPR. However, in the non-EU countries, maybe you have another policy, like something else to follow that your country has established or something else being established, but not the GDPR. And to be able to share data between EU, non-EU, what you have to get is to a common point, like have an agreement between all NCs on how to manage the data in the most strict way. Let's say if the GDPR, for example, stipulates like a stricter way of managing the data or like differently, making sure that non-EU countries do that. And if it were the other way around, that. So, well, yes, basically that was a little bit of an explanation regarding Syria, but I think then it was very well answered with the direct responses. And then regarding like what is, I also have one from Switzerland, I think, so I forgot. Basically about this, yes, it's true, the international office does pay attention to that, but as also Arad mentioned a few weeks ago, I believe there are some things to change. And also, again, this is what I mentioned at the start. I think we are all NCs and non-NCs doing the same mistakes. Yes, the figure of maybe a working group or like a policy would help ensure that everyone does the best, let's say, in terms of managing data. Thank you.
Thank you, Spain. I would like to ask everyone to keep their points very concise for the next round of debate. We will start off with Germany as promised before, and then we will take point from the governing body.
Thank you for recognizing. I just would like to point out that by using Google, all the data that is stored in Google is technically exported into the US. So it's every data stored in the Google Drive is basically a data export outside of the EU. So we should definitely think about how to manage that and how to get permissions on data exports, no matter what NC we are or where which data we store.
Thank you, Germany. Vicky, you have the word.
Oh, good morning, everyone. Thank you for bringing up this debate. Is definitely very relevant. Something that we wish to point out is that we can all agree that this is a joint effort. So for sure, the IO and the GB will be willing to provide support and advice while ourselves, we try to develop our own policies and update them. But it is also important for NCs to work on their own data protection infrastructure themselves. So we're very much welcoming the idea of having an international data protection officer in NCs, that if that could help you, that would definitely be a good idea that you can all adopt. And as some NC representatives already mentioned, I mean, there is a legal obligation for us to comply with the GDPR, yet the discrepancies between the infrastructure itself still persist. So on the point of having a policy, because of these discrepancies, maybe a guideline would be more adequate, that maybe can be actually more detailed given the differences that are present within the network, within infrastructures. And something, last thing to say is that we would also like to consider trainings on GDPR compliance. I think that is a very good idea. And as we're already reviewing that internally,
having a network-wide training on that would be very beneficial. So thank you very much for your points.
Thank you, Vicky. And we are very, very happy to welcome Norway to the debate. Welcome, Norway.
Thank you. And thank you to EYP Spain for bringing up this very important and complicated topic. I've been in charge of data protection in our NC for the past year, and I have a comment about the data protection officer role, because at least in our NC, I think having a data protection officer outside the board would have been very impractical, because only board members have the, say, necessary day-to-day involvement with the local activities in the NC, and it would be quite impractical to have it outside the NC. I wouldn't recommend making it a requirement to have a board member as a data protection officer, but at least a strong recommendation. And then I also have a remark that the GDPR is in fact law in non-EU countries that are part of the European Economic Area, such as our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. I see we have a direct response from Belgium. Is this still relevant?
It's related to the data protector officer, so I don't know if I can go ahead with that point.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I will keep it very briefly. Yes, in EYP Belgium, we also have a data protector officer. It's called the Information and Innovation Coordinator, and it's outside of the board, which we don't really find an issue, as they just get access to the relevant information, and they're also they get a vote of confidence at our General Assembly. So we want to encourage every single NC to also do this in practice, as a board member or like someone who's outside of the board, which main task is getting the data like in lines with the GDPR is quite important, as we board members day to day, we kind of forget that. So we really want to encourage everyone to do so.
Thank you, Belgium. So in this round of debate, Germany asked a question about the fact that since most of us are using Google, the data is exported to the United States. Io touched upon the fact that due to differences in infrastructure, a guideline might be a better option, and the importance of trainings. And Norway and Belgium touched upon the data protection officer. So I will now give the floor back to the proposing entity to answer.
Thank you. Regarding what was said at the start of the GDPR and the information being stored in the US, I am, okay, first of all, maybe whatever I say now is not true. Okay, this is what I think, because this is what I've looked for on Google. Yeah. Ironically, I've looked, I've searched there about this, and basically, like at the start of the year, I was like researching if actually, like by using Google, we are not following the GDPR, but of course, Google, I think has like, well, I think has adapted to all of this by all of the information I have read. And also, I think it was like, it is what they should have done, because lots of people use Google Drive, so it would have been stupid for them, I think, not to adapt it to the GDPR, even though they're in the US. Maybe I'm mistaken. If I'm mistaken, please let me know. I'm not sure. And then, yes, about the DPO, I think Arad has important stuff to say about this, because he controls this information. So I will let him later clear this up probably, but if I'm not mistaken again, but what he has told me, a board member is not the ideal person to be a DPO. However, myself being DPO and being president, I understand why it's the best thing to happen, because you have itself, like I have to see everything that is going on, and at the same time seeing if it's well manage the data or not is easier than another person that maybe doesn't have the much, like doesn't give the same time as a board member having to check all of that. But yes, again, this is something really confusing in general. So maybe I'm mistaken about all of this. And yes, I'm from the GAB, then like, thank you, because it's very important for like NCs have it, like to know that you support this, understanding the importance of all of this. So yes, thank you.
Okay, we will take a point from Denmark first. Denmark, please.
Thank you. It's very short. And it's still just on the note of the data protection officer that we also do have, in fact, in EYP Denmark. We have not been very active in using the data protection officer, and definitely is something we should look more into, as it is by law a need and something that we have to rely on, that we can actually use the data right. But I would also say that it's most optimal to have one who's not in the board and not directly affected by everything discussed within the board. We have chosen to have one in the advisory board who knows what the board is about, as they have been there earlier. The hope someday would also be potentially to be an alumni or someone more outside of the board. Our current member space and the fact that we are still relatively new and young NC has not made this possible earlier. But we hope to go into a phase where that can be possible, as we definitely see advantages of having a person not directly affected by the board, but still able to give advice, knowing the structure of it.
Thank you, Denmark. We will take point from Germany, followed by Croatia.
Thank you. I'd like to point out that if we use Google Drive, we have to sign contracts with Google, which can be done in the Google Admin Console if anyone hasn't done this yet. So we need to do this in order to be GDPR compliant to use Google. And in those contracts, it is stated that everything is basically a data transfer to the US. So that is where my point came from.
Thank you, Germany. Please, Croatia.
Yes, thank you. What I would like to point out very quickly is that oftentimes when we talk about GDPR, we talk about consent, but consent is not the only basis for data protection. A lot of the things that we usually process, like medical information or dietary requirements, is basically what's something that's in the interest of the data subject or the people who are filling out our forms. So for those specific categories, consent is not something that you should base your data collection on, but rather their interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Croatia, we will go back to the proposing entity for an answer. And also, as a side note, we have received a formal request to have a working group on this. So we will, after answer from the proposing entity, we will discuss the formal request further.
Well, again, this is all a lot of complex stuff that I'm sure like many of us, like including myself, are just like learning about whilst we are listening to it. And I'm not really going to answer specifically to what has been said, because I'm sure there's lots of other similar questions and stuff. And I don't think today all of this can be solved. So with my turn here to speak, the only thing I would like to say is that by just seeing how difficult it is to answer ourselves these questions and having doubts, even though we understand all of this, I think, again, with this window, it's very necessary to have like a turning point in terms of all of this and implement stuff to be able to yes, do this well. So I'm not going to say nothing else apart from I encourage whatever is going to come now. Yes, that's all. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Anna. So as I said, we do have a formal request sent in by Sweden. I will see if we can maybe have it on screen, but basically EYP Sweden has requested to form a working group on the data protection, about the data protection issue that we have been discussing. I would, if Anna doesn't mind, I would like to have a short round of debate about what NCs think about forming. Do NCs agree with forming a working group about data protection? Yeah, so EYP Sweden, do you have any points on the formal request?
A quick note in response to the rest of the debate, if you don't mind, because it's an important one.
Sure.
Great. Regarding data protection officer, it's fine if it's in the board, but don't name it a data protection officer. It's a legal term. It's if you use a term, then there's lots of legal requirements about no conflict of interest, because you can't oversee data protection and be the one in charge of establishing the purposes of how you process your data. That can't happen. And then it's all the education, funding, lots of requirements which some NCs just don't have the capacity for. Secondly, Stefan is correct with regard to Google Drive. We don't have time to discuss it, but Eric and I can talk about this for hours about how privacy shield due to Schrems 2 decision is invalid. And lastly, we need to oversee the consent clause in the code of conduct because it's invalid. So the consents you gave before the BNC meeting in the code of conduct, it's not binding. In short, that's my points.
Thank you, Sweden. As you can see, we do have the formal request open on the floor. BNC board has accepted this. This is a form. It already has a chairperson and basically it has a very good layout of the goals for the working group. So I will now take questions or points about the formal request on the formation of the working group. The floor is open. If anyone has any points about the formal request on the working group, sorry. I don't see any. I would like, should we then go on to vote about forming the working group? Oh, EYP Switzerland, you're recognized.
Thank you. Yes, I just had a question for EYP Sweden. What would the main priorities be, in your opinion, that the working group should focus on as a priority?
Thank you very much for the point. The priorities that we have in mind is firstly, creating templates, for example, proper consent forms, and possibly also a privacy policy for NCs to use templates for that. Secondly, a practical guide as to common mistakes NCs make and concrete recommendation as to what NCs can do to ensure that they take one step closer to become compliant. Thirdly, I reckon we will explore the avenue of international data transfers due to the fact that a significant number of NCs are outside of EU and the EEA and aren't applicable for the adequacy decision from the Commission. But I welcome all points, if there are any, about what specifically we should do in addition to that. Finally, I just want to remind every NC to check the, what's it called? It's called the International Gov Slack channel, where I've posted a link to a form in which NCs are expected to answer a few questions, like 4 or 5 questions, and share their documents. And we don't expect you to have an arsenal of GDPR documents, but attach those documents that you have in order for us to identify what common mistakes there might be.
Thank you, Sweden. I can see hands up from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina, please. Very welcome to the debate.
Thank you for accepting me. First of all, I want to thank EYP Sweden for actually starting this much needed working group. I had a question. Is it possible for the working group to organize a training for all NCs once they have to say let's say they have once they have compiled all of the recommended practices and all of the recommended steps in order to ensure better data protection for all entities. Because I'm sure all of us would like to reach kind of a consensus as much as we can on how data should be handled and protected. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see Franz also has their hand up. Franz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, EYP Spain, for bringing this topic, and thank you, EYP Sweden, for the working group. I could see the outline was pretty clear, so thank you very much for that. I was wondering if you were envisioning to take kind of legal advice also in the process of the working group. For instance, the IO mentioned in the chat that they have legal advisors, and I know, for instance, a lot of bodies in the countries also provide advice regarding GDPR. Is it included in your way of working? Thank you.
Yes, Turkey will take your point as well, and then we'll go back to EYP Sweden for an answer.
Thank you. We were kind of this is maybe like a personal question directed to Arad, because he wrote like he wants to take the initiative as a chairperson, and we were not sure, since this is like a international problem that we are going to have with NCs outside Europe and NCs within Europe, and a lot of NC information is likely to also pass through this group. Is it like a good enough thing to have someone who is involved with an NC to run this working group? Thank you.
Thank you, Turkey. EYP, you have now option to answer.
Yes, thank you very much. I could address the third point here directly. Two answers. The first one, we won't collect personal information. But what I mean by collecting GDPR-related documents is not like a list of your membership spreadsheet. This form specifically specifies consent forms and policies, guidelines, not consent forms that are already filled out. So we won't be processing personal info per se. Secondly, funny that you mentioned that I'm involved with NC. I will actually leave the board by, well, the end of June, which is the approximate time where I will be mostly active with creating the guidelines or the documents that we are trying to pursue and work with. So that should not be a problem, luckily, even though I don't see a obstacle there at all. It's a common interest to establish a compliance within the network. To address the first point, if I didn't miss, as I understand it, the question was about if there will be some sort of training involved or in some way ensure that it will be implemented. I want to be clear that the working group will do the best to establish concrete recommendations that are easily to understandable for NCs that are not exactly don't know the know-how about the GDPR to 100%. We will have that in mind, but to actively train in a great extent for a longer period of time, that is not something that we have in mind as the moment. Instead, it's just a practical guide and recommendations. That sort of commitment is not not at this moment something that we can take, possibly during the next BNC meeting, but not now. We need to take one step at a time. The second point about legal advice, we welcome any communication with the external DPO that Anya mentioned from the foundation. That could be of great help. We do have some experience within the upcoming working group. I myself, part-time working with a law firm who specializes in GDPR. Don't want to make any expectations that we will seek out legal advice per se, but we will do our best to properly convey how we reach our recommendations within that guideline. So it's crystal clear for future NC members to scrutinize how we came about in our decisions. Yeah.
Thank you, EYP Sweden. And I would now like to have a vote on this working group, establishing of this working group. So once again, we would like to pass it nomina contradictions, meaning that if nobody objects, it's unanimously approved. Is there anyone who would like to vote via roll call? I don't see any hands up. So I guess we can say that we have established a working group. Congratulations, Sarah. And yeah, the working group will now start working. They will have their mandate until the next meeting. And if EYP Spain would like to have final word on this debate, they have the floor.
Just to say thank you for to everyone who has said something, and well, I suppose thank you to EYP Sweden and Netherlands for the support, and since the proposal has been out, being in contact with me and trying to figure out a way of making this work. And yes, I wish you a lot of luck, and I encourage you all to find members to you think that can potentially help in the working group to do so. And it's important to collaborate together. And if you have any resources, whatever, let's start being more collaborative also with each other, and maybe that can help us all more in the long term. So yes, basically that. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, yes. Anna, from my side as well, having been present at the 1801 meeting where it was last discussed, it's great to see that there have been some improvements made, and NCs are more knowledgeable about the data protection as well. So it was very, very interesting to follow this debate now 3 years later as well. And with that, this agenda item has been finished. We will now move on to the next agenda item, and I will give the word over to David, I believe. David?
You believe correctly. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the second debate. I already sent it in the chat a few minutes ago, but just a reminder, everyone, please sit up straight. It's very early in the morning for our backs to be curved. I know this is kind of a tendency. I was trying to pay attention to it myself, and every now and then I also noticed myself going like this. So yeah, just back up and all that. And also remember to keep drinking water. BNCs are stressful. And just because you're sitting in a chair doesn't mean you don't deserve to hydrate. So with that out of the way, I would like to notify the BNC that the BNC board has received a formal request by EYP the Netherlands to stop the live stream for this debate. I would maybe pass it to someone from the EYP the Netherlands to maybe explain why you put this formal request forward, and then we can have a mini debate on whether or not it's worth it to stop the live stream. And now, if you want to brief the rest of the BNC on your rationale behind this.
Sure, yeah. Following the debates of yesterday, also regarding this topic, we noticed that there was a lot of passion and emotion involved. And we thought that if we were to pause the live stream for this debate, NC representatives might feel a bit more freer to say what they want to say without the pressure of having an audience. Although, of course, everything will be put down in meeting minutes. Not having a live stream might make it easier to talk about certain topics.
All right, thank you, Anel. If anyone has any thoughts on whether this should or shouldn't be live streamed, we'll now have some time to talk about it before voting. So just put your virtual hand up if you want to make a case for this. Okay, Turkey has their hand up. Turkey, you're recognized.
Yes, we would like to thank EYP Netherlands for bringing this up. We think it would help some NCs that are not that free to talk about certain things in live stream actually express their opinions as well. And we would like to encourage all NCs to think about other NCs and say yes, basically. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Turkey. I don't see any more hands up. And since Turkey was also in support of NL, I would suggest maybe we vote on this formal request via nemini contradicente. I'm getting better. And so with that said, if anyone wants to oppose that we vote on this way, if you'd rather do a roll call, feel free to mention it now. Otherwise, I will stop the live stream. Okay, so no one is complaining, so I'll assume this formal request has passed. And with that said, if you are by chance watching us on YouTube, I'm very sorry. We will be back in approximately 45 minutes. If you want to find out more about this debate, as mentioned by EYP NL, the minutes of the debate will still be published. So if you were really, really curious to see the opinion of the BNC on this, you can still see the minutes. I didn't actually check the view count, so I'm not sure how many people I'm addressing. I hope at least one. And sorry, random person on the internet, and we'll see you in 45 minutes.